breaking news. No, it's not that serious. Plus that's Tony's thing, right? We are talking about some Micro Four Thirds, L mount, Panasonic rumors, all that kind of stuff. The big one is this patent for a internal variable ND filter system, but we're going to talk about a ton of rumors because there's a bunch of little things here and there that I wanted to bring up, wanted to talk about. All right, let's check this out, see what's going on here. So let's just jump right into it. But, you know, you can always go down the time codes and look in the description for when whatever subject you are interested in comes up. But I'm going to briefly touch on some of these other ones. So some wild GH7 camera rumors. So all we have here is a trusty German blogger mentioned that a Panasonic GH7 might come out this year. He said it would be the only Micro Four Thirds camera coming out this year. So, yeah, I don't know about this one. GH6 was only released like a year and a half ago. We've heard rumors about a G9 successor coming out quite a bit with phase detect. So maybe they're just getting this kind of mixed up. G9 2, GH7, or maybe it is supposed to be a successor to kind of both those cameras. I think it makes sense that the G9 2 would be not quite as photo-centric since it's going to be the only Micro Four Thirds camera with phase detect from Panasonic for a while at least. So I wouldn't be surprised if this G9 successor is a little GH series focused more towards the video than, previously I or any of us might have thought, just because it is going to be that only camera with phase detect for a while. But do I think a GH7 is coming out anytime soon? Well, it was like, yeah, they released the GH1, 2, 3, 4 kind of like within 2 years of each other, but GH5 took a little bit more time, and GH6 obviously took more time than that, so I wouldn't hold my breath on a GH7 just yet, but I guess anything's possible. Moving on, we've got some purportedly bad news, but not really. So the 35 to 100 Mark II has been discontinued. But to me, that just means, like I predicted before, there's even more, impetus for them to release a Leica version of this lens. Well, the Leica lens would probably have a few, motor tweaks to support better phase detect autofocus, which we are pretty much certain is coming to Micro Four Thirds now. That was my guess as to one of the reasons they updated the 12 to 35. And they also included some fun feature upwares like the linear focus. I think that was already in the Mark IIs, but also closer minimum focus distance, which would be super warranted and helpful on the 35 to 100, which has what I would describe as painfully average minimum focus distances, which is usually better on Micro Four Thirds, but not in this case. So I talked a little bit about some leaked lenses for the L mount, but I missed one and I have a few clarifications on some others. So there's actually 4 lenses here. I only reported on a 28 to 70 and a 100 to 400, which first off, the 100 to 400 is probably looking more like a 100 to 500, which is pretty cool. Not sure about the aperture on that, or the 28 to 70, but 20 to 70 either is going to be a smaller f2.8 version, kind of like the Sigma, or an f2 version, so a big chunky pro lens, super pro lens, like the Canon. So again, I'd be curious to see you guys' thoughts on that one. The other lenses are interesting as well. We've got a 100 millimeter, which I think people are speculating this is going to be a macro lens, which makes sense. There's not a lot of macro out there for the L mount right now, at least from Panasonic. And they're also predicting it's going to be a 1.8, which usually I'm seeing like 2, 2.8, even like 3.5 for macros. So if they release a 100 millimeter f1.8 macro, that's going to be a really versatile lens, and it's going to kind of line right in with the 18, 24, 35, 50, and 85 in terms of aperture and all that sort of thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if this one's a little bit bigger. I doubt that's going to line up with, the size, weight, sort of gimbal stuff of the other lenses. But I'd imagine it's going to be in a similar style with maybe a couple switches and a bigger size. The last lens, which I was on the last chart, but I didn't really notice because it was a different color, was a 28 to 200 millimeter lens that they're coming out with, which is a pretty big range. To me, I kind of first thought of, okay, well, if I compare it to other Panasonic lenses, this kind of reminds me of maybe the 75 to 300 they released, or the 20 to 60 they released. So my initial thought was, okay, that's going to be like an f3.5 to 5.6 start to aperture, maybe 6.3, something like that. But then I was reminded of the Tamron 28 to 200, which is a 2.8 to 5.6. So if it uses that formula, or even like straight up uses that formula, 2.8 to 5.6 would be pretty useful, I think, for a sort of all-in-one lens. So I don't know. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it going to be a little bit more casual, like the 20 to 60, or is it going to be a little bit more high-end, like that Tamron, which is still kind of just a prosumer level? I mean, but I'm curious to see what your thoughts are in the direction and the like concept and the idea behind that lens. Okay, so here's the big one. We've got a Panasonic patent for a variable ND system, and it's pretty complicated stuff, but you know, before I go into the details, I have a few questions about this. So one would be, what camera is this going to go in? And I have to assume probably not a small G9 non-flagship camera for Micro Four Thirds. I know it's like the photo flagship, the G9 is, but I don't really necessarily see this as a Micro Four Thirds thing, although it would be very cool if the GH7, whenever it does come out, has something like this as well. I think most people are assuming this is going to come to the S1H successor, S2H, S1H Mark II, whatever they're going to call it. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a very popular camera. It's Netflix approved, and adding functionality and things like that to the camera, I think makes a lot of sense. A few other questions I had was, will the S2H, S1H Mark II have IBIS? And is IBIS going to be compatible with this sort of system? Watching Panasonic Lumix Live, they talk a lot about there's no system that currently exists that can do variable ND filters in an SLR, and no variable ND filters that work with IBIS. And so if this is if they're trying to create the first thing that solves that issue, that's a whole nother level. I don't think they're going to want to do another GH5S situation where people are just like, this is the perfect camera but has no IBIS, even though that's kind of missing the point of the GH5S and would be missing the point of this camera. But even if there is no in-body image stabilization, this is pretty huge step for Panasonic. And, it's just as continuing their history of kind of bringing popular features into the prosumer market before anybody else does. I mean, don't get me started on the list, but, introducing and popularizing stuff like dual gain sensors, IBIS, things like that, things that are standard throughout most DSLM cameras these days is, don't underestimate their ability to innovate in the space, even if they don't get the credit or the sales they deserve. The last question I have is, what will the strengths be? Because, as we're going to talk about in a second, it's a variable ND system. I want to see how low it goes, how high it goes, and all that sort of thing. But let's get into the nitty-gritty here. So it essentially looks like it's using a swing away sort of system with two layers to it. There's a front system that has the ND filter layer, and then there's that back system, which to me feels like it's just a clear glass piece, basically, what they call like a protective layer. They make a lot of references to this. They never say that the strength of this is going to be like 0 ND. So I guess there's the remote possibility that this is just like super strength, single strength ND. Most of the diagrams and things I see here refer to the filters either being one down and one up, or the other one being down and the other one being up. So it seems like one of these filters is always going to be engaged, which implies to me that one is just a clear glass protective piece, and the other is going to be your ND filter. So how does the ND filter work? Is it two polarizers? What's going on here? Well, actually, this is something that a few other cameras use, like I think Red and Sony has a few cameras with this system, and it's what people refer to as a electronic ND filter. So the system here is an electric ND filter, which actually uses like what's called liquid crystal technology, which liquid crystal sounds like a Metal Gear Solid character to me, but it essentially lets you apply a certain amount of voltage. So you're either adding voltage or taking away voltage to darken or lighten this ND filter, which allows for really smooth steps, and it allows for no like filters whipping in and out unless, I suppose, you completely turn it off, which I think then the filters would switch back. So yeah, very cool technology, very interesting, and the way they've sort of set up these two things to swing away to the, I guess, if you're holding the camera, right side of the camera. Actually, let me get a camera and show you. So if this is your camera, you've got ND filters here or the protective glass filter, and they would simply swing away into this area, which would prevent them from being always enabled and would allow a small form factor, well, not quite this small maybe, but a form factor like an SLR. But it's really the mechanism that they've made that is going to revolutionize this. The liquid crystal thing has been included in a couple cameras, but it's never been in a form factor like this. And so having this mechanism that allows it to swing away, and I'm sure we're going to get the same vent cooling system here, or maybe in the back like the S1H original. But it's really cool. It's really, to summarize, it's really just a variable ND liquid crystal technology with voltage being applied to turn the strength up and down, and then a clear glass piece that comes in when that ND isn't needed. And I guess I really quickly wanted to talk about the position of this. So it looks like it's supposed to be controlled by a knob on the front of the camera. So right here, and you would just turn it, it looks like. So this is where the record button is on the GH6 and the S1H, and I do like that record button for like shoulder mounting, or for on a gimbal, or for even for like the vlogging stuff, which is probably not the intended audience for this exact thing, although I'm sure someone's going to vlog with this whenever it comes out. But I do wonder if they're going to have the record button like on top of that little knob, or if it's just going to be gone, because that would be a little sad, but I feel like most people would consider that a pretty worthy trade-off for a variable, smooth, stepless ND filter system. So overall, I think that ND filter patent is the most interesting piece of news in the lot I've read today, for sure. I'd love to see it to come to other cameras. I'd love to see it come to any cameras that Panasonic has, and I think that is going to be, once again, Panasonic setting the standard and challenging every other company to come up with their solutions to this issue, because this will be the first mirrorless SLR style camera to have this type of mechanism, which, you know, everybody's been asking for years. So I guess we'll see. But anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by. Let me know, do you guys like these kind of rumor breakdowns and hearing my thoughts, or should I focus more on other videos? These are pretty quick videos to put out, so they don't really take away from other videos necessarily, but yeah, I just like talking about it, and I like hearing what you guys have to say. So let me know down below, what do you think about these new lenses, the discontinued lenses, possible GH7 versus a G9 Mark II, which again seems unlikely to me, but I guess we'll see if this German vlogger person is correct. And especially, what do you think of this new patent for this variable ND system? Is it coming to the S1H Mark II, or where do you think we're going to see this thing pop up first? Anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.